This time on Plastic and Pixels, we're going to take a look at the newly released Space Hulk Deathwing. Since I first laid eyes on my dad's old copy of 1989's Space Hulk, I've been enraptured in the setting, and while the idea of an immersive, first-person, squad-based take on that has been done before with games like Space Hulk, Vengeance of the Blood Angels, this is the first we're seeing of it in this era of gaming. So let's gear up, strap on our Terminator plate, and dive right into Space Hulk Deathwing. The story for this one is nothing special. You, a librarian of the Dark Angels chapter, must lead a squad of Terminators on board a Space Hulk, a mass of spaceships, asteroids, and other space garbage that have accumulated together. You start by investigating the disappearance of the squad before you, Squad Gideon. You go on to seek out various relics and stop the plots of the Gene Stealers on board the Space Hulk as you continue through the game. The story isn't especially compelling, even considering it's written by Black Library's own Gav Thorpe, who's cut his teeth on quite a few Dark Angels novels. The gameplay of Space Hulk Deathwing will be familiar to players of Left 4 Dead or the excellent Warhammer End Times Vermintide. There's a ton of weapons to choose from that all differ in one way or another, which you unlock as you progress through the game. I was worried about the gameplay at first though. The only game by this developer I've played before is the hilariously janky and remarkably French I Divine Cybermancy, a game which borrowed from 40k as much as it did from Deus Ex. The shooting feels fairly similar to the shooting from I, but it's much more visceral with some really meaty gore effects. Melee combat is just mashing the Q key or holding it for stronger attacks, and while it produces some nice sound and visuals, your screen will be overwhelmed by gore and Gene Stealers most of the time, so there's not much room for finesse anyway. There's a simple tactical interface in place to give commands to your squad mates, kind of like you see in the more dumbed down Tom Clancy games or Republic Commando. It works for the most part, but the wheel can be kinda hard to navigate in a firefight, which at one point turned my request for healing into an order to run to the other side of the room, an order which got one of my Terminators killed. Death doesn't mean much though. You can use your psi gate a few times per level to go to a safe zone where you can heal up, change your war gear, and revive your fallen comrades. As someone who has played numerous iterations of Space Hulk over the years, this feels odd to me. The board game and previous video games are built on a razor-thin margin of error, and the idea of getting multiple do-overs spits in the face of that. Granted, you can just not press the psi gate button for a more true experience. The map you use to navigate levels is handy, and you can regularly perform a scan to pick up any auto turrets that may be on the map. You can then hack these turrets or disable them, much in the way you hack doors to open or lock them behind you. This feels really strange to me though, and definitely betrays the developer's legacy of cyberpunk action RPGs. It feels at odds with your other actions, and like a feature straight out of I Divine Cybermancy. A pretty standard and unexciting upgrade tree is in place, and as you beat the levels and find secrets, you'll get more points to spend on it. Weirdly, if you don't spend your points, the game has a big red warning saying all unspent points will be lost forever. Most games would just prevent you from leaving the screen till you spend them all, but I guess just putting a text warning is easier? I don't know, it just seems kinda weird. The upgrades are what you'd expect, getting you extra armor, more efficient squad mates, new psychic powers, and so on. I actually really enjoyed exploring the secrets, and the greater relics you find will appear on the silhouette of a marine, so it's kinda cool to see him get filled out. As for multiplayer, I was only able to get into one actual game, in which I was the squad apothecary. But I was only level 1, so I didn't have the ability to heal myself unlocked, so I promptly died, respawned, and immediately died again. Every other game I tried to get into had a connection error, but for the 15 minutes I got to play multiplayer, it was more enjoyable than single player. Players are, in theory, more competent than the AI, and having 4 Terminators instead of 3 gives you some much appreciated firepower. Voice chat isn't in the game, which is typically a blessing, but I can imagine this would be pretty enjoyable if a few buddies and I jumped into a Mumble or Discord server and gave it a shot. I knew this game would look impressive from the very first trailer, and it looks pretty damn good, especially for a game by such a small studio. The gothic ceilings, glistening gore, barking bolters, and cramped corridors of Space Hulk are impressive to behold, and completely in line with the setting. I really liked traversing the underbelly of the ship, and all the attention to detail is pretty great. There's little purity seals everywhere, most of which actually have prayers and catechisms written on them, which is a great touch. The ships all have a wonderfully lived-in aesthetic, and there's a ton of little nods and Easter eggs for dedicated 40k fans who really feel like digging around. Also, I hope you like dead bodies, because they are everywhere in this game. There's a dead body! There's a dead body! You expecting something a little livelier? Nope! Dead body! I really do appreciate how it feels to be a Terminator in this game. Your screen is bordered by parts of your armor, and if you look down you can even see your boots stomping down the floor. Having the diagram of your armor on the right showing your health plus all the little readouts and such really gives you the feeling of actually being in tactical dreadnought armor. I do wish the sound effects for stomping around and dropping down were a little bit louder though. At one point, I jumped off a walkway and landed some 20 feet down only to be met with a dull metal thud, not really a sound befitting a walking tank. I also wish the localized damage meant more. It was touted that if your left arm, for instance, got damaged, you wouldn't be able to use that weapon, but if I ever took enough damage for something like that to happen, I'd just die anyway. As a whole, the audio design is a mixed bag. There's not really any music to speak of. If there were even ambient tracks, I couldn't hear them. This was disappointing since the music ramping up when hordes or big baddies attack in Left 4 Dead or Vermintide really amps up the tension and makes the battles more exciting. It's kinda shocking that the Amiga version of Space Hulk had more music in it than this game. The voiceover work is solid, but repetitive. Some of it is really hammy, which I'll chalk up to the French developer and iffy translation, but the narration at the start of missions sets the stage well enough. The guns don't sound especially punchy, even when you're shredding gene stealers with the best of them, but the melee sounds are satisfyingly squishy. Also, for some reason, this was the sound I heard whenever I paused the game. Makes a really great case for turning your speakers off, doesn't it? However, there are long stretches of ambient noise where it's just you, your footsteps, and the creaking of the ship that are really atmospheric and evocative. I do wish the Marines would chime in and offer some kind of banter during these extended periods, though. They don't need to rattle off Joss Whedon-esque quips or anything, but some kind of conversation would be nice just to keep things from getting stale as you skulk around an empty corridor for 10 minutes at a time. Maybe I'm just spoiled by the Dawn of War games, but that's the kind of thing that really helps give your game personality and makes it memorable. One little sticking point that bothers me from a fluff perspective is the fact that you're not really running a full squad of Terminators. You get your 2 bodyguards, but that's not really a Terminator squad of 5 as you see in the tabletop game or the background. Hell, I'm pretty sure even the dead Terminator squad you find is 5 dudes. The first trailer showed a squad of 5, but unfortunately you're stuck with 3. The co-op is 4 players, which is a bit better, but still. This is a really minor point, but as someone who has a goddamn Crux Terminatus tattoo, you bet it bothers me at least a little. Do yourself a favor and turn the head bob to low in the options before you start playing. I played through one mission and had a headache by the end of it because of how much the camera was jostling around. This feature also resets every time I start the game up, so if I forget to do it, I'll get a headache again to remind me that I missed it. The AI is kinda silly too. Gene stealers are supposed to be cunning creatures that skulk in the shadows and strike when the opportunity is right, but here they just rush you in an endless swarm of expendable bodies. The friendly AI is a little wonky, but more useful. They can take care of themselves reasonably well, but I wish the apothecary would heal himself and the other guy if they're about to die. They have a habit of getting in your line of fire or continuing to shoot the area after everything in it is dead, but they don't take friendly fire damage, so it's okay. Speaking of fire, every gun kicks like a mule. The assault cannon in particular bucks all over the place, and landing a shot is a matter of luck more than anything else. It's practically a melee weapon, and last I checked, Terminators were supposed to be relentless. I can't give this game an honest opinion without mentioning the glitches. There are the occasional weird physics hiccups, and pretty frequently I'll have the game all but freeze for a second before it goes right back to normal, as you may have noticed from the footage. That's not the capture, that's just what the game does. Crashes to desktop are fairly common, and given the game's massive levels and lousy checkpoint system, this can lead to a lot of lost progress, and a lot of time just walking through empty corridors trying to get back to where you were. Particularly frustrating to me was when I found a pair of relics, which are pretty well hidden, only for the game to crash to desktop. I had to find where those relics were again because they don't save after you get them, and in levels this big, it can be easy to lose your way. Most confusing is the weird mid-levels, where you'll be more or less halfway through a level only to get a mission accomplished screen, but you'll stay on the same map with all the relics you still found. It basically signals the mission is a little more than half over. I got one of these and then died shortly thereafter, which sent me not to that mid-mission, and not to the previous checkpoint before that point, but all the way to the beginning of the level, which lost me all my progress and all my relics, plus the new weapon I'd unlocked. Considering I'd also crashed the desktop twice on this mission beforehand, I'd easily lost 2 hours of playtime. I don't mind death having consequences. Dark Souls is one of my favorite games of all time after all, but broken checkpoints and unstable game were more ruthless and frightening than any Gene Stealer. If the game gets patched to be more stable, I could give this game an okay recommendation. There's a lot to like here, even if it's marred by bugs and obtuse game design. Maybe by the time it comes out in consoles, it'll actually be a pretty reliable experience. If it stays like this though, wait for a Steam sale. Thanks for watching my Deathwing review. If my opinion significantly changes in the future, I'll make a new video, but for now, I'm so-so on it. Let me know how you've been getting on in the comments, and it'd really help me out if you subscribed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.